Yes, guys, week 2 fantasy football is upon us. So today we are going through every single position: wide receiver, QB, tight end, running back. Giving you the top 24 rankings, talking about some guys right outside of those rankings, some must-start studs, some key insights. Everything you need to know for week 2 begins right now. So let's begin with the wide receiver position. So here is my top 24 for this week: CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua. That's kind of going to be the first tier. The first note here is that Puka Nacua needs to be in this tier. Basically every single week. I mean, the Houston Texans have a pretty good pass defense. Derek Stingley, I know he was a little banged up for a little portion of that game, but came back. Puka doesn't matter. He missed time in this game too, getting evaluated for concussion. 10 catches, 130 yards, and he was my wide receiver 3 coming into this season. And then all of the stuff with Stafford began, where he wasn't practicing for months. So admittedly, I moved him kind of into a top 15 player, that 1-2 turn pick, as opposed to a top 10, top 8 player. But when we go back to the game log from last year, look at these targets. Look at these targets. Beginning in week 10, let me read you his targets: 14, 9, 13, 8, 14, 8, 9, 14. So a minimum on a bad day of 8 targets. In a couple of these games where he had 8 or 9 as opposed to 13 or 14, a touchdown in each of those. So he gets it done regardless. He is matchup proof. The only worry is his own knee injury, which he's battled for a couple years now. And then, of course, Matthew Stafford. He is like almost the wide receiver version of Christian McCaffrey, except we have not seen, an 8+ year career or whatever as a finishing wide receiver 1, best player in fantasy, things like that. But my point is, when he's out there, he needs to be in this tier of Jamar and Lamb, okay? Some other wide receivers kind of here going into the next tier: Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, okay? Ladd McConkey at 7, Jackson Smith and Jigba at 8, at 9, Nico Collins, and 10, Brian Thomas. That is a tier in itself. I'm expecting nice bounce back weeks from, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas, Nico Collins. These guys are studs. You can go buy them. You can go trade for them. As far as the Amon-Ra situation goes, the Lions, I worry about Jameson Williams. You won't see his name in the top 24 today, and I worry about David Montgomery. Those two kind of benefit from the Ben Johnson style of offense, where there are layup touchdowns, or there are special plays, or there are trick plays and long plays, and I don't know how many we're going to get. Whereas with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, they are focal points of the rushing attack and the passing attack. Jahmyr Gibbs is actually a bit of both. That's why I still have him a top 3 overall player. Okay? With Brian Thomas Jr., we'll talk about Travis Hunter. He is approaching this top 24 range. He's not in there yet, but I think both Hunter and Thomas are great starts this week. Brian Thomas is still the alpha. They noticed he wasn't catching the ball. They noticed the targets weren't connecting, I should say. And they gave him just a goal line rush opportunity, which he scored on. So he is an integral part of this offense. Hunter, I think he had 8 targets in his own right here in week 1. He is approaching the top 24 range. And there are also some studs. We'll get into the next kind of tier here. Number 11, Drake London. 12, Garrett Wilson. 13, Cortland Sutton. 14, Marvin Harrison. 15, T. Higgins. That is a tier right there. I think there are some studs that deserve another chance, and T. Higgins' name just comes to mind right away. The Bengals start slow every single year, and it happened again here. We look at T. Higgins, I believe he only had 4 targets in this game, and they really only had one good drive, the Bengals, to start the game, where Chase Brown plunged into the end zone. Higgins caught a ball on that drive. Other than that, though, not much. But then we play Jacksonville in week 2. McMillan actually, for the Panthers last week against the Jaguars, he wasn't amazing, but it was his first game ever. Still got a ton of volume. The Panthers defense stinks. Okay? Or excuse me. Yeah, still got a ton of volume. The Panthers defense stinks just like the Bengals. So I could expect a little bit of a shootout here. All right? Into the next tier: Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf, Tet McMillan, A.J. Brown down at 20. I am not sorry. I am just not sorry. Okay? Emeka Egbuka, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Terry McLaurin. I do think Pickens and McLaurin should be in lineups as wide receiver 2s. Okay, they deserve another chance here. Pickens, a lot of defensive pass interferences, missed targets in the end zone in that first game. Terry McLaurin just wasn't on the same page with Jaden Daniels, but they're going to need him tonight because the Packers look good. They can move the ball. The defense is very good. So those two got to connect tonight. I'm recording this super early in the morning here on Thursday, so we shall see. You'll probably watch this as the game is going on or after the game, but we should see. McLaurin just makes it inside my top 24 here. And then some guys close to being in the top 24. Already talked about Hunter, but Rome Odunze, 9 targets, 6 catches for a touchdown. It is very hard for fantasy to kind of separate from the real-life NFL media, okay, and what it means for fantasy. You would have thought that Caleb Williams and the Bears lost this game by 40 points. Was it a terrible NFL loss? Sure. I don't really care about those things. I care about your fantasy team winning games and my fantasy team winning games, okay? Rome Odunze is essentially taking over the wide receiver 1 role for the Bears. I do think there is a very realistic world where both Odunze and Moore still finish both top 18, top 15 at the position. I mean, the Vikings defense is as good as it gets. Caleb Williams, 24 fantasy points versus them, top 5 in rushing at the QB position right now. Rome Odunze, 9 targets, caught that late touchdown, and it wasn't garbage time. Like, they were within a couple scores there. So he looks great. DJ Moore, a little bit more odd usage, kind of like in the Jameson Williams role, if you will, like a little bit if we're doing the Ben Johnson thing. So I don't know. You'll notice Moore has been downgraded out of the top 24. Odunze is coming up. Those two are much closer in rankings than week 1. Okay, let's move along now to the wide receiver must-start stud of the week, and it is Emeka Egbuka at Houston. So he currently is a top 3 fantasy football wide receiver, and I know there's only been 1 week, so another way of saying that is he was a top 3 receiver last week. But you need to do what you have to do, and you have to get Egbuka in your lineup, okay? The Texans allowed 30-plus fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. In week 1, they were absolutely torched through the air. I do have Egbuka as a strong wide receiver too. You see him right here. Wide receiver 21 this week, just 1 spot below A.J. Brown, okay? Like, A.J. Brown, Emeka Egbuka start-sit questions should be pretty realistic. I'm tired of the name value here with A.J. Brown. He can be sad in some leagues, I'll say it, but with that being said, he'll probably be force-fed 11 targets this week, so I don't want to sit him this week. Do have him firmly in the wide receiver 2 range. Okay, let's move on now to the tight end rankings, all right? You'll notice I start these off with none other than Brock Bowers. So let me just pull up Brock here in his game log from week 1, because, we had a bit of a rant in the video earlier in the week, and it might continue right now. So you would have thought that the sky was falling here with Brock Bowers in the first half, not playing on run plays. He's not getting snaps. They're running the ball. Yeah, so Ashton Genty, when he has the ball, he's probably not throwing it to Brock Bowers. They don't really care if Bowers is on the field. And then, I checked the box score. I'm like, damn, is Bowers finished? Are we done here? No. Only tight ends go over 100 yards here. 8 targets, 5 catches, and he missed like a quarter. Yeah, so Bowers is the clear and obvious tight end 1. It looks like he's going to play this week. They play Monday, so he gets an extra day to rest. If you have him, pick up Michael Mayer. I think he'll be a very nice start. Trey McBride is right in that tier. And yeah, I do have Tyler Warren right in that tier. Those are the top 3 tight ends. Obvious. Really shouldn't be anyone else, in my opinion, sneaking into that top 3. And I don't think there's a different order for that top 3. In the next tier, Laporta, Kelsey, Hawkinson, Ferguson. That is kind of the next tier of guys where they're just very strong tight end 1s. Ferguson missed a couple seam routes, famous Dak Prescott seam routes, right? Harold Fannin comes in at number 8. One of the best rookie tight end week 1 performances ever, right up there with this guy. 9 targets, led the team. I don't know what else you want. We're giving him wildcat snaps. Like, they really want him to get the ball. He was the best tight end in the NCAA last year. Kind of an unconventional play style, but it seems to be working. Okay, so Harold Fannin comes in at 8. I really enjoy putting him in my lineup, even against the Ravens, at the Ravens. But the Browns are probably going to be down 40 points. And it's not like Fannin's going to be rested, right? He's a rookie. So he should be started. Kincaid got loose last week. Dawson Knox got loose against the Ravens. I get it's different. It's not the Bills, right? The Browns are not the Bills, but Fannin should be started. If we're talking streamers, I like Strange a lot. I like Juwan Johnson a lot. Tucker Kraft firmly in the top 10. I say firmly as he sits there at number 10, but like, who do you want me to put him over? Fannin? Sure. Okay, now he's number 8, right? Whatever, doesn't matter. I'm downgrading Njoku a ton. He could be started. He's still a tight end 1, but I really do think it's Fannin's job. I really do. And Fannin was a priority waiver pick. If you got him, kind of like a congrats moment for you. How do I get out of this picture? Okay. When we look at and Evan Ingram, I'd rather not start him. There are 13 other tight ends I'd start over Evan Ingram, even though he is looking like he's fully healthy. Okay. Moving along to the must-start stud, I do have TJ Hockenson versus Atlanta. So one thing we always see with Hockenson is high snaps. And tight end, it kind of reminds me a little bit of running back, where it's like, 80% of snaps, there should be alarm bells going off for the tight end position. That's why it makes like Cade Otton, for example, such a great streamer, and he was so good in Cohen's offense last year, is because he was just on the field always. And guys like Cohen, okay? Guys like McConnell in Minnesota, when these guys are playing a lot of volume, a lot of snaps, they just find the ball. The targets are going to find TJ Hockenson. He's famous for his high targets. We go back to last year, week 12, 9 targets, 6 targets, 5 targets, 7, 5, 6, 8. That's good for the tight end position, okay? The first half of this game for the Vikings was awful. Let's not forget that. Two things can be true at once. They looked horrible. McCarthy looked like the 32nd best starting QB in the league in the first half. And then in the second half, he looked like a top 10 guy. Two things can be true at once. So the offense didn't move in the first half. And then once it started moving, Hockenson saw 4 targets. What if it was 6 or 7? What if he caught 5 of those if it was, right? So you got to be in on Hockenson still. Top 6 guy for me. He is a must start, not starting Fannin, Strange, Kraft, Johnson, Njoku, none of those guys over him. McCarthy impressed. He didn't look for the tight end too much in the first half. And, look at the matchup. Atlanta this week absolutely cooked through the air last week by Tampa Bay. So I do think the targets will find Hockenson. Okay. Let us now get into the QB rankings here. So 2 guys simply above the rest here. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And, for everyone saying, like, I just thought it was funny. Like, how could you put Josh Allen above Lamar Jackson in the draft rankings? And that was like 50% of people thought it should be Lamar, 50 thought it should be Allen, but the Lamar people were quite enthusiastic. So it's just funny when you watch the games, like the reason is because there is no Derrick Henry on the Bills. Like, that's literally the reason. It is Josh Allen. He is both Lamar and Henry for that team. And we saw it in real life NFL when they beat the Ravens when he came back. He just makes things happen. I wish he would do a little bit more of it in the playoffs just for my own fanhood, but not that I'm a Bills fan. I just wish Josh Allen would win a Super Bowl. That'd be hype. Anyway, Allen and Lamar, congrats. The early picks were worth it so far. Hurts, Burrow, and Daniels are the next tier. 0 concerns. Some new names here as we round out kind of the top 10. I do have all these guys in a tier. Herbert, Mahomes, Fields, Murray, and Prescott. Again, no concerns here. Herbert is passing more than ever in his career. Mahomes looked great, even with a lack of weapons. Fields was a top 10 running back, which we'll talk about him in a second, okay? Kyler Murray looked great, even though you don't want to admit it. Dak Prescott, bounce back week coming. Then we get into 11, Baker Mayfield, 12, Bo Nix. 13, Trevor Lawrence, 14, Caleb Williams, 15, Jordan Love. A couple notes on those guys, all right? I am expecting a bounce back from Trevor Lawrence. I mentioned Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, and Bo Nix. All those guys are still pretty highly ranked. I expect bounce backs. In terms of Caleb Williams, QB9 last week versus the Vikings. Like, for fantasy football, what more do you want? Honestly, what more do you want? Him to stick his arm out in the fourth quarter there and score the rushing touchdown as opposed to throwing it to Rome the next play? Me too. I would have won my matchup, right? I get it. But QB9 versus the Vikings? Top 5 in QB rush yards right now. He has like almost 60 rush yards in week 1. Yeah, he's a high-end QB2 against Detroit, who got smoked by Jordan Love. Speaking of Jordan Love, QB 15, J.J. McCarthy 16, Drake May is downgraded heavily. Just was a very slow start. Like, I need to see something here because I'm seeing things from someone like Michael Penix at number 18. Jared Goff at 19, Stroud at 20, Geno Smith 21, Aaron Rodgers 22, Daniel Jones 23. He should probably be moved up a little bit, maybe around Stroud, but I need another week of it. And then Matthew Stafford at 24. I don't really want to start guys that are named Tua Tagovailoa and Bryce Young. I'm not very interested in starting them. I don't know about you guys. The QB must-start stud here of the week, we do have Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields, rushing line. Let me pull this up. In week 1, I mentioned it before, but if you just took his rushing, he would have been a top 10 running back. Okay? 12 attempts, 48 yards, and 2 tutties. That's like 16 fantasy points in RB1 last week. Oh, and then you just go ahead and add on over 200 passing yards and a passing touchdown through the air. Yes. So this is why Justin Fields is overpowered for fantasy. Every single year that he has been a starter, in those games that he started of his career, he has been a top 12 on average fantasy football QB. He does not belong on the right side of this. If he is active and he is starting a game, he belongs over here. He belongs 1 through 12. Stop putting him over here. Okay? Lamar just dropped 70 rushing yards and a touchdown versus the Bills. We all saw it. I'm not saying Fields is Lamar, but Fields plays the Buffalo Bills this week. Clearly, they struggle with the rushing QBs. All right? There only are a handful of guys I'm starting over Fields this week. Allen, Jackson, Hurts, Burrow, Daniels, Herbert, Mahomes. And Herbert, Mahomes, like we need to have conversations about those guys, but I do still put them there. All right, let's get into the running backs. You know, my favorite position in fantasy football, as you guys know. Okay? I feel like I'm most in tune with the running backs. I feel like how do I put this? You know, because, I mean, the name of the show is No Expert Fantasy Football. I don't claim to be some sort of, genius or super analyst for fantasy football. I more so just talk about it, make content, and try to help you guys with my lineups, how I'd manage my teams. But with that being said, I feel like the advice that I do tend to give is best and most accurate for the RB position. I feel like I understand the utilization best, and I'm confident in these rankings and these takes, okay? So in Tier 1, we have a big Tier 1. We have McCaffrey, Henry, Gibbs, Barkley, and Bijan in order. You could really order those guys any way you want. I do have McCaffrey clearly at 1, even with Mac Jones. I don't care. Mac Jones is going to hand the ball off to McCaffrey or throw the ball to McCaffrey 5 yards down the field, max. Zero worries. Okay, Derrick Henry looked like an absolute freak. Again, the worry with Henry and my low ranking of him during draft season was not that he was not good, was not that he would not be a top 5 running back in games. It's just that I hope it lasts, is all I will say. Jahmyr Gibbs comes in at 3. He's absolutely bulletproof for fantasy. No matchup should have him outside of the top 3. Because if it's a bad matchup, the offense isn't good, 10 targets. No problem. Saquon Barkley at 4, Bijan Robinson at 5. There are absolutely zero complaints with these top 5 guys. Then we get into kind of the other half of the RB1s, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Devon Achane, Ashton Genty, James Conner in another A-plus matchup, Josh Jacobs at 11, and Kyron Williams at 12. With Chase Brown, he's kind of just tied back into the Bengals thing. I mean, Jaguars defense is not awesome. We saw Chuba Hubbard be pretty productive last week on the ground, through the air on the ground, I should say. I think he caught a receiving touchdown. So I'm expecting a nice week from Chase Brown. Bucky Irving, I'm monitoring if his snaps stay at 70% or higher. If he does, it basically confirms he has RB1 overall ceiling. Devon Achane was the only bright spot in the Miami offense last week, so maybe they turn it around this week. Even if they don't, still a top 10 guy. Genty, Connor, Jacobs, Williams, they're all just volume-based beasts. We get into kind of the high-end RB2s, a bit of a tier here. James Cook, Breece Hall, my GOAT, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor, Chuba Hubbard. I do have that as a tier. Omarion Hampton misses the tier, and he's going to be in the next tier here to round out the top 24 with Hampton at 18, Javonte Williams at 19, Alvin Kamara 20, DeAndre Swift 21, Tony Pollard 22, Jordan Mason 23, and I do have Zach Charbonnet at 24. Let's go back to the high-end RB2s here with James Cook, Breece Hall, Etienne, and Taylor, and Hubbard. You're either in this tier because you have a good matchup and you're an RB2, or you're in this tier because you have a bad matchup and you're an RB1. See Jonathan Taylor, for example. All right, James Cook looked great, hit the ground running, quite literally. Breece Hall looked great. Wow, almost like Breece Hall is an awesome running back. Who would have thought that last year? Probably the guy who told you to draft him RB1 overall. Wish we saw this last year. All right, word. Another pick I missed on last year, Travis Etienne, back in the top 15 running backs for me. Tank Bigsby traded. It's a complete victory lap. I'm being exposed a little bit online at the moment for my take that Liam Cohen would recreate his backfield here with Bigsby in the Irving role, Etienne in the Rachaad White role. I expected a 50-50 split this year between that backfield. The thinking behind that post was I expected Etienne to catch more passes, Rachaad White, and I expected Bigsby to be the primary rusher, Bucky Irving. So to try and cook me on that take is pretty interesting when, I have a signed Etienne jersey right over there. Is my favorite player in the NFL. He was my guy for 3 years in a row. I told you to draft him in the first round last year. Well, okay, anyway, regardless, on to week 2. Etienne is a top 15 running back. Jonathan Taylor here plays Denver, and I just, came out of the game injured last week. I don't know. I've seen Taylor be ranked all the way at RB3 this week, and I just think it's too high. I could be low at RB16. I just have him as a high-end RB2. Chuba Hubbard looking like the workhorse for Carolina, but the offense isn't really doing anything. They play Arizona now. Yep. Marion Hampton, we hear that Najee Harris is going to get some more work this week. Hampton didn't wow me, and if Najee comes in and steals 5 or 6 of those carries, we could have a problem. Javonte Williams at 19, workhorse, playing the Giants. All right. Alvin Kamara at 20. I need to see the targets come back. Only 2 targets in a game where Shaheed, Olave, Johnson all saw a lot of volume. All were top 24 in projected points. So I'm just confused where Kamara's volume is at 30 years old. DeAndre Swift at 21. Still a very good start here. Very good role. Tony Pollard, 22. Jordan Mason, 23. I saw him as the lead rusher there for the Vikings. 24, Zach Charbonnet over Ken Walker. All right, and a couple names that you might be asking, where are they? Let me scroll here. Just missed the top 24 in order. So at 25, we have Trevion Henderson, Bill Krosky-Merritt, 26, Dylan Sampson, 27, and Ken Walker, 28. Don't really want to be starting either Seattle RB. If I am, it's Charbonnet. I do think he's winning the job. Dylan Sampson remains a good start, high-end RB3 until Judkins comes back. Even if Judkins is back this week, I'm still starting Sampson. Bill Krosky-Merritt is a guy who could go and finish top 12, top 10 at the position this week if they give him more work. And Trevion Henderson, just kind of waiting. We're just kind of waiting. He reminds me of Bucky Irving last year. All right, now for the must-start stud this week. I kind of glossed over him in the rankings because I had a whole post dedicated to him. But it is Javonte Williams versus the Giants. The Giants were cooked last week, absolutely ripped apart on the ground. 23.9 total fantasy points to an assortment of Washington running backs, whether it was Eckler, Bill Krosky-Merritt, whoever. And right now, Williams, goal line work, some targets, 70% of snaps. And Jaden Blue is likely inactive again. So guys, that is going to do it here. All right, for my top 24 at every position and my must-start studs for week 2. I hope you enjoyed, guys. Good luck this week. Join the Discord down below. Ask me any questions you have. Start, sit, waiver, trade. Read my bonus content, all that good stuff.